Everyone, it's great to see you here for our peer editing, peer review, and tenure process webinar. I'm going to take a moment to introduce our presenters. First off, Allison Levy is Director of Brown University Digital Publications, a program of distinction launched with generous support from the Mellon Foundation and further supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. In this role, she brings together key organizational, academic, and technological resources to support new forms of faculty-authored scholarship, resulting in path-breaking, award-winning publications. She also spearheads efforts at the industry level to advance the conversation around the development, evaluation, and publication of born digital scholarship in the humanities. A hallmark of BUDP under her leadership is the centering of access and inclusion in the practice and production of digital scholarship. And Sara Cohen is Editorial Director at University of Michigan Press, where she handles acquisitions in music, theater, performance studies, and dance. She's previously worked at Temple University Press and University of North Carolina Press and holds a PhD in English from University of Minnesota. So with that, I will pass it over to the two of them to go ahead and get us started.
Thanks, Erin. And we talked about the possibility of doing quick intros in this room. Would people be comfortable would folks in the audience be comfortable just quickly introducing themselves? You don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to.
Hi, I'll go first. My name is Candace. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I know we haven't seen each other since last semester, but my name is Candace Folks, and I'm an English lecturer at Clayton State University, and this is the second go round. I'm really winging it because I'm eating some chocolate right now. But I am into African American studies, and I have my digital magazine, which is one of the things that I'm always promoting. So I'll drop the link for that in the chat, but I am really interested in this peer review, edited, and tenure webinar, and I submitted a few questions because I had my own questions for it. So I'll probably get to those at the end unless Erin says them for me. But all right, I'm gonna turn my camera off now and eat my chocolate.
Hi, my name is Jacinta Saffold. I am an assistant professor of African American literature at the University of Delaware. I recently switched universities, and I am an advanced assistant professor. And so this conversation is particularly of interest to me as I navigate the second half of the tenure track.
Good afternoon. I'm Criselda Thomas. I am professor of English and Interdisciplinary Studies at Kennesaw State University. My areas is African American literature and African American studies. I'm here because I am a professor and I want to be able to help support portfolios as they come up for review of people who are doing this kind of work. So I'm hoping this will help give me sort of the language and the framework to support the portfolios of assistant professors doing this type of work at my university.
Hello, I'll go next. My name is Jada Bradley. I am not a professor at a university. I am senior editor for culturally responsive education at Westchester Education Services. So I work for a content developer in educational publishing, but you never know where life will take you. And I'm just a nosy and curious person. So I'm here to listen in. Thank you.
Hi, can you go ahead, Lynn? Can we move this along?
Yeah, we can do it. Anybody else want to do a quick intro before we get started?
Hi, my name is Hayen. I'm a fourth year PhD student in the English department. And I study American, African American, then I'm interested in Black digital humanities. And I don't know, I'm glad we're doing this on Zoom because I've been sick a little and I'm actually in bed right now, so I'm gonna turn off my camera, but I'm excited and happy to be able to join you through Zoom on my phone. So glad to hear what you have to say for us. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
Sorry. My name is Glenn Waters, and I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Iowa. I got my master's in creative writing here, and I'm currently teaching creative writing and also African American studies. And yeah, I'm here just to kind of learn more about this space that I'm going to be navigating in the near future and in my young career. So yeah, very excited to learn and looking forward to it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Latanya Rogers. It's nice to see Dr. Levy and Dr. Cohen there. Hello to you all. And nice to see everybody else. This is wonderful that we're all back together. I'm really excited to learn this super information. So thank you to Aaron and Dr. Thomas Houston and Dr. Graham for hosting.
Okay, a few more people down there. Lavonda, Cole.
My name is Kole Odutola. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Florida. And I enjoy every session of this group. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Lavonda Broadnax. I'm a retired librarian. I'm working very hard on my project, and there have been so many resources to help me move my project forward. I'm looking forward to seeing how this process will be able to help me even more. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we have one more BPIP scholar, right?
Yeah, Sherry just joined us.
Okay, Sherry, good. Sherry, we're doing introductions. There you go.
Oh, okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Sherry Johnson, and I just was asking Aaron, what are we saying in our introduction? I'm a professor at Grand Valley State University. What else?
Do you want to tell us what you work on?
Okay, my what I was working on, or what I am working on, is on an article that looks at Black Canada and in particular Lawrence Hill's Someone Knows My Name, in which he highlights the relationship between Canada and the US. I'm hoping to utilize the platforms that we've been exposed to and practice using to kind of speak more to Black geographies in the ways that he draws on that within the text.
Great, wonderful. And Professor Graham, thanks for moving everybody along. Did we get everybody who wanted to introduce themselves?
We may have a few people coming in a little late, so
Okay.
we'll in as they come.
All right, sounds good. And people can they can just introduce themselves in the chat too, but Allison and I wanted to just get a chance to hear a little bit from you before you have to listen to us talk at you for a little bit. So so I am going to, by way of overview, I'm going to tell you a little bit about University of Michigan Press and also about our digital publishing platform, Fulcrum. And I'm telling you those things, not so much to sell you those products, but to give you a sense of where I'm coming from as an editor and to help you understand what I'm saying about proposals and peer reviews of digital publishing projects. And then Allison will talk to you a little bit more about what's going on at Brown, what's unique about it, and she'll also be dealing with a lot of the tenure questions that came up in the advanced questions you sent to Erin, because I don't know as much about that as she does. So I will get started. As Erin said, I'm the editorial director at University of Michigan Press, and what that means is that I manage our acquisitions department and I work with them toward our creative vision for the press's publishing program. I'm also an acquisitions editor in my own right, and I handle our books, as Aaron also said, in the performing arts, so music, theater, performance studies, and dance. As you all probably know, different university presses are known for different things. At Michigan, some of our strongest publishing areas are disability studies, performance studies, political science, and classics, but we're also known for being innovators. So we're known for our commitment to accessibility. We're one of the only university presses that requires our authors to write alt text that makes their illustrations legible to people with print disabilities. We are also the first university press to become what's called a Benetech Global Certified Accessible Publisher. And that's a real point of pride for us, especially as an early publisher of disability studies. We are also known for our commitment to open access publishing. When we publish a book open access, we make a free electronic version available on our digital publishing platform. And we also make the OA edition available through vendors like Amazon. When we publish a book OA, as long as it's something that can live in print book form, we also publish a print edition, but we publish projects that are born digital and can really only exist in that way, and then we just do them online. Our current funding model at Michigan is called Fund to Mission, and this funding model allows us to publish 75% of our front list monographs. So that is our new scholarly books, open access. And we're able to do that without authors bringing us any funding. And the reason we're able to do that is because we have the generous support of the provost at University of Michigan. We have the sales of our ebook collection to libraries. The income from that goes toward making books available open access. We ask for subventions from authors at universities who offer subventions under the thinking that a rising tide can lift all boats. And so folks who are at universities that don't offer subventions can benefit from the universities that have deeper pockets. And of course, we also make a little bit of money from the sales of our print books. So I said, we're known for our commitment to accessibility. We're known for our commitment to open access publishing. And the last thing I wanted to say that we're known for is our cutting edge work in digital publishing, particularly through our digital publishing platform, Fulcrum, which I'll tell you a little bit about. So the Fulcrum platform was developed with support from the Mellon Foundation. It is designed to be flexible, so that is responsive to the changing needs of digital scholars, to be durable because it's built on university library infrastructure, to be discoverable. Fulcrum ensures that content is discovered by readers and that impact is tracked. And also going back to our commitment to accessibility, Fulcrum is designed to be accessible. We have a very high standard of accessibility that makes our content available to users with print disabilities. The Fulcrum platform allows our authors to include audio files, video files, zoomable color images, interactive maps, and some other items in the electronic editions of their books. I often say to people that Fulcrum is not the sexiest digital platform out there, but it's probably the most reliable. We're not able to publish bespoke born digital projects like Allison does at Brown, but we are able to work within the strictures of our platform to publish non-traditional projects. So along these lines, I've worked with somebody to publish a peer-reviewed rap album. We've also published some like podcast style audio books, and I'm talking to people about doing some more video-based projects because we can take these audiovisual materials and aggregate them into what we call book-like things on the Fulcrum platform. So I'm grateful for all the questions that you shared with Erin in advance of this webinar, and I'm going to start to answer some of them now as I transition into comments about peer review, how I do it. I'm going to speak from my experience and my processes as an editor for digital projects, but my processes have been developed in conversation with other editors of digital projects at other university presses. So I hope that what I have to say about how I do things ends up helping you navigate the larger world. So for digital publishing projects, I think it's best to contact an editor at the point when you're ready to write the book proposal or you have a working draft of it. And the reason that I think this is the right time to talk to an editor is because at that point, you know what your argument is. You likely have some digital materials that are polished, and you likely have some writing for the project completed if it's going to include any writing. At this point, you're starting to form a vision for what the digital project will look like, but it's not totally fixed in your mind yet. And I think that's a perfect time to bring in an editor. So when I talk to an author at this point, I like for them to be flexible about what the project might look like. And I want to emphasize how important flexibility is when you're working on a digital project. Different presses use different digital publishing platforms. In some cases, they do sort of bespoke digital publishing, but everybody's going to have different capabilities. So when you go into a conversation with an editor, you want to know what your project is and you want to have some ideas about what it will look like. But I also think it's important to be able to meet them in the middle, the editor in the middle, in terms of what their platform and what their publishing program can support. These conversations with editors for digital projects involve a lot of compromise, sometimes between the author's vision, the platform's abilities. And like I said, we need authors to be available, like willing to meet in the middle. In terms of reviewing digital projects, I think it's really important to send them out for review at the proposal stage. So as a proposal and usually some sample materials, which might be writing, it might be AV materials. I like to send stuff out at this point because it allows you as the author to get feedback about what you're thinking. It allows me as the publisher to hear from people outside of my head, how the project is working, what might be different. And so usually, like I said, sample materials will go out for review with the book proposal. And in proposals for digital projects, I think it's really important to include details to help readers imagine what the project will look like and how users will interact with it. So I like my authors to include a section in their proposal about how the project will live on our platform. And because I know the platform better than my authors do, I work with them to write this section. So they'll say to me, like, I want my project to do this, 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 and this. And I'll say, okay, well, we can do this, this, and this, but we can't do this. And so let's why don't you draft a paragraph based on what I told you? And then we'll do some back and forth to get it to a point where you're describing a project that could actually work on our platform. If we've published a similar project to what the author is thinking about, then when I send the project out for peer review, I'll ask the peer reviewers to take a look at the other projects. So I'll say, the project that I'm working on with Professor Jones is very similar to this other project we published by Professor Smith. Here's the link to it so that you can take a look and imagine what Professor Jones's project might look like. But if we don't have a project that we've published that's similar, I think that the section of the proposal that describes what your published project is going to look like needs to do heavier lifting. And so again, I'll work with my authors to make sure that they're giving their readers enough information to imagine what this project is going to look like. For a standard monograph, like a 6x9 scholarly monograph with 5 chapters and 100,000 words or whatever, I have a set of peer review questions that I use for nearly all my projects. I'll adjust them occasionally, but they're more or less one size fits all questions. And I found that for born digital projects, it's best to customize the questions we ask our peer reviewers. So I work with my authors to generate those questions. And I would encourage all of you, if you're taking projects to publishers, digital projects to publishers, and you're talking to the editors and the editor says, I want to send this out for review, I encourage you to very nicely ask if you can be involved in the process of generating the questions for the peer reviewers, because you know your work better than anybody else. And you know what would be helpful, what would be constructive, and what might not be. And so by thinking together with your editor about a good set of questions, you can get the best possible feedback for your work. I start the conversation about peer review questions with my authors by sharing my standard questions. And then I'll sometimes dump them in a Google Doc and I'll say, okay, can you go in and play around with these and show me how you would change them and what questions you would add? And then we'll go back and forth on a couple of drafts until we're happy with the questions that we come up with. And so there's, let's see, I think this is actually missing a letter. Yeah, okay, so I had a link I was going to share that shows my standard peer review questions next to questions that I formulated with an author. But I have to get it back. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to drop this. So at the end of this piece, which I'll drop in the chat, at the end of this piece, there's a link to see the standard peer review questions that I was using in 2020, and then the peer review questions that Dr. Carson and I arrived at for his particular project. And so you can see a little bit of where I started and where the two of us ended up after our back and forthing. There's a question about timeline for peer reviews, and for my peer reviewers, for a full proposal and sample materials, I usually give the reader 6 to 8 weeks. For a full project, I usually give readers 8 to 10 weeks. And since the pandemic began, I always include a line in my peer reviewer invites that nicely says that I'm happy to offer some flexibility with the review timeline if readers need it. And I also ask my authors for flexibility and patience with the readers, because I think all of us have gotten a lot busier and have different relationships to work than we did in 2019. One of the questions Erin shared with us prior to this session is, in the context of digital humanities, how do editors navigate the challenges of assessing the validity and reliability of data sources, tools, and methodologies employed in a project during the editorial review process? And so I'll put that question in the chat because it was a multi-parter. And I have a very simple answer to that question, which is peer review, right? I mean, with peer review for standard scholarly monographs, we ask peer reviewers to assess these exact issues. And with peer review for digital projects, we ask reviewers to assess the same issues. And some editors will have specific questions about each of these. In addition to these issues, one of the things that we have to ask reviewers to think about with digital projects is the user experience. And so I know this is something Allison thinks a lot about in her work. We have to ask our peer reviewers, you know, is this thing that the author wants to publish, is that going to be usable? And if not, how could it be more usable? So I will stop there and I'll give the floor to Allison. But I hope that this has started to answer some of the questions that you shared prior to the webinar, and I also hope it's generated more questions that we can talk about in the Q&A. Peer-reviewed journal different or the same? I will be honest with you and tell you, Candace, that I don't know anything about peer reviewing journals. And so if you're talking about digital peer review, the folks that I think are really adept at this are the folks at the journal Kairos, and that's Kairos. And I'm sure that somebody on the editorial team would be happy to talk to you a little bit more about peer review for digital projects, digital articles.
Yeah, I second that. Thanks, Sarah. And hello, everyone. It's really great to be with you all. And I'm just, happy to be part of this group today and share the work that we're doing at Brown and to answer some of these questions. I'm going to focus more on the tenure and promotion review process and how digital publishing fits into that. But I'm going to start with an overview of Brown Digital Publications, which will, I think, also provide some context for my responses to the questions. And I'm going to show some slides. So let me share my screen. And I hope you all can see that.
Yep,
Yes.
good.
Okay, super. Brown is not a press. Brown Digital Publications is not a university press. We have not had an active press in about 30 years. We are supported by the Mellon Foundation. We were sort of tasked in 2015 to rethink scholarly publishing. And our approach to that is mainly author support. So primarily authors here at Brown, but not exclusively, I'm happy to report, and that is changing. But when we started off, certainly we were supporting our faculty across the humanities and the humanistic social sciences, and working with faculty at all career levels. And that includes increasingly more and more early career scholars. And so there are unique considerations, particularly around tenure, and I'd say an extra responsibility to those scholars. So we pay we're just very attentive to the authors that we're working with and what their needs are. So let's see, we started this work in 2015. And you see that there's been strong interest on this campus. We now have 16 projects in our portfolio.
3 of those published, and let's see, now the remaining are in various stages of development. And we also have started a book series with MIT Press, which is a channel through which we can work with other authors, and I'll say a bit more about that. A big part of what we do is training and mentorship. So we have a postdoc program, we work with graduate students, and we also run a summer institute, which is not very unlike the program you all are going through. It's all about author support. And so we got our first grant from NEH to run the Institute in 2022. And we will offer a second iteration of that Summer Institute in this summer, in July of 2024. And I'll say more about that. I hope you all will consider applying for that. I think the programs are complementary, certainly, and LaTanya can speak to that because she was in our first cohort, and now she's participating in this program as well. So I think the more support we can give authors, the more perspectives that we can bring to this, the more expertise we can share, the better. So it is great, again, to be here with all of you. We also have a training program that is sponsored by IMLS. We're training librarians at 3 different HBCUs. So let's see. These are the 3 publications to date. So our work has been open access and exclusively digital. And again, this is mainly a decision between our faculty authors and the press that we work with. We don't work with a single press. We have so far published with Virginia and Stanford and MIT. We have a work under contract with Fordham. And so we're seeing, again, the number of presses who are interested in bringing out digital works is growing, which is wonderful news. We are platform agnostic, so we don't use a single platform. We really make this selection based on the project, what the multimedia assets are, what needs to be supported, what the desired user experience is, how the author wants readers to engage with the work, and then we match that with a platform. We've used Scalar, WordPress. What else do we have? A custom site there, and some others. These 3 projects have won prizes. We're really proud of that. And when I answer some of these questions about validation of digital publication, I'll say more about prize opportunities and how important it is to bring that information to tenure committees. And let's see, this is something of a snapshot of the work in development. And again, it's really across the humanities. Many different disciplines are represented here. The one that's enlarged on the right is the project that is forthcoming with Fordham. The reason that I've highlighted it is because it is serving as a case study for a grant sponsored by Mellon, which is being administered by NYU libraries, and this is to advance the work around preservation, how we preserve complex digital publications. And so we're learning a lot from that experience, and all of that will be shared out. Okay, sorry, just a message popped up on my screen. Let's see. And again, the work is very collaborative, as you all already know, and we have some of our graduate student proctors with us and 2 postdocs just working here. We are based in the library, by the way. We are a program within the Center for Digital Scholarship, which is a long established unit here at Brown, and it is in the library. And this is that NEH institute that I mentioned, I will be sharing the information with you all. And again, I encourage you to apply. I know LaTanya can speak to the experience. We bring in a cohort of 15 scholars, specifically scholars beyond the Brown campus. This is not for Brown faculty, but this is for scholars who may not have the resources at their home institution to develop this kind of work. And so it was a very successful program 2 years ago, and we're very grateful to the NEH to allow us to run this again. Yes, that is the NEH Institute. And then the, let's see, IMLS program. LaTanya is participating in that. I see you in one of those squares in my snapshot of the screen. This is a program that actually enables Sara and I to work together very closely. It is first and foremost a training opportunity for librarians at Fisk, Kentucky State, and Prairie View. But the training is directly tied to the development of a digital publication by a member of their faculty. And that's how the authors come into this. And this is an opportunity for us to support the development of the project over the full life cycle, as opposed to an intensive 3-week summer program where we're sharing out a lot of information, but we can't fully take on the development of the project just because of the resources available to us. And the HBCU Library Alliance is a partner in this program, and of course, University of Michigan Press. So that is a 3-year program, and we just got started in the fall. So we're things are just getting underway. I should say too about the NEH Institute. In our inaugural cohort, more than half of the 15 scholars teach at HBCUs. And so we are hoping to see that kind of number again this summer. And then we started a book series with MIT Press. This is a means for us to work with scholars, again, away from Brown. This is a book series on visual culture and social justice. So if anyone is working on that broad topic, please do consider this opportunity. The first title was released just earlier this week by Kimberly Juanita Brown, who is at Dartmouth. There is a paperback produced by MIT, and then an open access digital edition produced by Brown. So that's an overview of the work that we're engaged in. And I think that I'll stop my share. This way I can see you all again, and I will answer some of these questions. Thank you for sharing these with us in advance. So a lot of questions about tenure, and that's really critical to all of this. So I'm happy to talk about how things unfold here on this campus, and just what I'm hearing from other colleagues at other institutions, or what I'm seeing. Here at Brown, the co-PI on our Mellon grant is the dean of the faculty. So that was really from the outset, that was the structure of the grant, the university librarian and the dean of the faculty. And for me, I'm the one working directly with our authors. Having a direct line to the dean of the faculty has been invaluable, particularly for early career scholars, so that I have a sense of, not just a sense, but I know what the timeline is for their tenure and promotion cases, and I'm able to share peer review reports, for example, with the committee. The dean of the faculty visited all of the departments at the very beginning and worked with the department chairs to adjust the language in our standards and criteria documents so that peer-reviewed digital publications of the sort that we are developing are given equal weight in the tenure and promotion cases. So this is a very important, very clear message coming from the dean of the faculty. And so if there's any way that you could communicate this, I'd be happy to share these documents with you. They're done at the departmental level here at Brown. Depending upon the discipline or just the makeup of the department, the language might be different from one to the other. But it is the case at Brown that digital publications are again, they're part of the dossier and they are reviewed just as a print book would be reviewed and considered for promotion. Certainly we would like to see more of that happening on other campuses. But having that the academic administration involved is very important if that's not already happening at your own institutions. I mentioned that I share the reader reports with the tenure and promotion committee. So about once a year, I will attend one of their meetings, and any of our faculty authors who have just had work peer reviewed, I bring everything to them so that they can see just how rigorous the process is. And there's a question about how do you get people to understand what a digital publication is. I speak about that a lot, even on this campus where we are doing a lot of it. Certain disciplines and departments are more conservative than others. And so it just takes a lot of communication to explain what this work is, that it is original, long form argumentation that is making a significant contribution. It's just presented in a very new, different, innovative way. So there, I can always be explaining and pointing to models so that the members of this committee really see what we're developing. And I talk through the process and just answer any questions that they might have about it. So in addition to I think the importance of the peer review reports, we're seeing more and more guidelines from disciplinary organizations on how to review digital publications. So I think this can be an invaluable resource as well for you to bring to your departments, to your academic leaders. The MLA, the AHA, CAA, so many organizations have produced these guidelines, and on our website, we have a resources page where we have maybe 10 to 12 of these disciplinary guidelines with links. And so I will put that in the chat for you all. Here it is. I have it right here queued up. So let me just get that in the chat. Let's see, everyone. There you go. That will bring you to the Brown Publishing website, the opportunity or resources page. Sorry, not opportunities, resources, and you see that as well on the website. So I think that's an invaluable resource. Also prizes. We've been fortunate to receive awards for our publications. And so that's another way to demonstrate the recognition that this work is getting. The ACLS, the American Council of Learned Societies, in the past year announced a significant book prize. Approximately $20,000. I don't remember exactly the details. We're lucky to be a finalist. One of our projects is a finalist for that, and we'll the winner will be announced in May. But this is a prize for open access monographs, and so that there are prizes for born digital publications. I think also is very important information to spread to those who are making decisions about tenure and promotion. So I think I'll stop here and just look forward to the conversation. But I hope that this this already gives you some very useful information, but I look forward to hearing additional questions from you all.
I have a question. This is Jada Bradley. My question is, when you create these digital publications, well, in the print world, you have editions of scholarly books, like they'll come up with a new edition, something will change in the world, they have to add information, take information away. Are you doing the same thing with these digital publications? Creating different editions after 5 or 10 years or after 2 years? How does that work?
Well, we're not on our end, and it's great that I think Sara and I are together, because we do, though we're so involved in digital publication, we have different roles to play. So we at Brown, because we're not a press, we don't think of ourselves as a publisher, but more of a producer. So really assisting our authors in creating the work. And so we don't return to a work once it's published, and we work very closely with the publisher to get it to that point of publication. But post-publication, and unless there's maybe a glaring typo, I mean, certainly it's easy enough to go into a digital publication and change something, but we really try to limit that to the first few months after publication. That said, we had a little glitch this week, a work that was published in the summer of 2022. A reader, no one we knew, someone out of the country even, sent an email and said, I noticed this little thing, and we didn't notice it. We've moved on to the next projects, and so we immediately corrected it. So obviously maintenance and preservation, this is a commitment, and we certainly want to maintain the work, but we don't add additional chapters or we don't really add content. We will just correct errors, either technical or typos.
I'll speak for a moment for iOpen, the press that we work with, and Afro-PWW as a whole. We do consider additions to a series. If an author, for example, Kenton Ransby, has learned a lot more about visualizations and gathered a lot more material on his Jay-Z book that he has published in Scalar for us. And so he's come back to us with a new proposal to have a new edition of that. And we are considering that to make that a part of what we envision will be a series that he will create as it relates to the Jay-Z mixtape, which was his original publication. We require that it have a different name, But we will publish that as an additional amount of data to his original work that he had.
So if I can say, that would be sort of an expanded and enlarged edition, so to speak?
Yes.
So because we use that language sometimes.
Yes,
People,
exactly.
Expanded and enlarged. Okay. Well, we're waiting for people to, okay, somebody has one, okay. I was gonna pose another question or comment. Did I interrupt somebody?
This is Jada. I was just saying thank you all for the answers. So
Okay, thank you, Jada. So that distinction that you make, Allison, I thought was very helpful. That is producer versus publisher and the maintenance. So, you know, and Marilyn, I want you to kind of think about this too, because you do both of those things. You help in the obviously aid the production, that is the author support. And of course, Afro PWW is publishing through iOpen.
That's correct.
So can you maybe talk a little bit about what happens when you merge those two, or some thoughts about that? I think that clarification was very helpful.
Well, we started out merged. Our original Mellon grant looked at us with Afro PWW producing works on the Black Studies works. And we joined with the library, whose then publishing entity became iOpen, which we have now, Illinois Open Press Network. And so from the beginning, that's the way it was, that we, Afro PWW, would bring scholars who have experience in the Black experience or Black studies, from historically Black colleges and universities, or faculty who were at other types of institutions, but the Black experience was a part of their specialty. So that's what we brought to the Mellon grant that we jointly did with the University of Illinois. After those 5 years with that grant, we saw an opportunity to do more than what we had been able to do with the original grant, which was to have one-day workshops around the country. And what we learned was you cannot teach people how to do a digital publication in one day. So I designed this online class to see how many people we could reach with it. And we ended up having it in 3 different formats as our sort of trial version to see which one of the formats works best. I think we've sort of decided that there still needs to be structure. The other 2 were self-motivating kinds of courses, and we found that people needed more interaction with our team members, and so we designed more of a originally it was an 8-week, but we turned it into an 8-month kind of online course for people to use. And I think in terms of learning the platforms, that it works well, but we haven't yet found a way to get the kind of time that faculty members need in order to produce and get the finished project. So that's something we sort of working with iOpen to find ways that the knowledge gets translated onto the actual finished product. So we have many products waiting to get over into the production site, but we have only a handful of projects that are either in the production site or have been produced already. So we're still working this out. But for the most part, yes, to the question, Afro PWW is sort of the producers, and iOpen, which is the tech team part of our, is the publisher end of the project.
It's super interesting to hear about your experiences teaching digital publishing, Marilyn, because I think Allison and I are starting to encounter with the IMLS project that we're working on some of the same challenges that you're encountering. So I would love to meet with you sometime and talk. I think if we put our heads together, we could solve all the problems with teaching people digital publishing.
Thank you. I'd love to do that.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we're talking about the split between the producer and the publisher, and it's like, or what was the split? It's the producer and the
Yeah, it was
what is it?
the publisher, but also the producer, publisher, but author support
Yes.
is built into that. So maybe that's a three-part thing, you know?
Yeah, and it's like at Michigan, we do all those things, right? Because we're a traditional publisher. And so I feel like Alice, like we have models for that at University of Michigan Press because we take a book from idea to finished product. And I think that Allison and Marilyn need to kind of invent the wheel and figure out how to do the work differently when it's not all under the same roof. And I think that what they're doing is fascinating and so much more complicated in a way than what I have to do, because I can just walk over to my production department and say, do that thing now, right? Whereas you have to work with all of these different units. So pretty cool to hear from the two of you about that.
Well, it is one of the main reasons that I thought Michigan would be such a great partner for the IMLS program, because Michigan has its own platform with, Fulcrum, which does a lot. And certainly I learned from the first Summer Institute, the platform question was really overwhelming for the authors. Which platform? And then the thought of learning how to use that platform is also can be so time consuming and costly depending on the platform, if something has to be built or customized. And so I was trying to think, how can we just remove that from the equation so that the authors don't have to worry about that. The authors can focus on the scholarship and the innovative presentation of the argument, but the platform has already been decided for them. And the other extra special thing about Michigan and Fulcrum is that even the work of ingesting the content into the platform happens at Michigan. So so this really, I think, in terms of moving the authors along, this is a critical piece of it, because I saw last summer people, and understandably, it can get sort of stuck and distracted by matters where, if we can find the experts, the professionals who are working with these pieces of the puzzle, bring them into the collaboration, and let the scholars be the scholars. So that's the experiment that is taking place with that IMLS grant.
I see Aisha has a question.
Yeah.
Do we have time, Erin? To take this question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm happy to take it. So, oh yeah, I forgot we go till 4:30, not 4. Sorry. Keep the questions coming, everybody.
You got 30 minutes. You're good.
All right. Yeah, I would love to talk about this. This is something where I intervene a lot. So one of the dirty secrets of acquisitions editors is that we do not read a lot of the manuscripts that we publish. And so the place where we intervene is in big picture stuff. And one of the most direct places to intervene is in helping our authors figure out what to do with their readers' reports. So this, I think it's true of, and Allison can talk about her experience with this as well, and it's probably similar and different, but the reader reports, the way that I deal with this for digital projects is the same as I deal with it for traditional print monographs. So when the peer reviews come in, I send them to my author. I say, here are the peer reviews. I need you to write a response to this. Laura Portwood-Stacer has a wonderful post in her blog about a formula that you can use to respond to peer reviewers, and I'll try to find the link and share it. And it is a lifesaver, and I've been sending it to people recently because I spend so much time explaining how to write a response to the readers, and Laura just has this like plug and play model. But sometimes I think you need a little bit more than just the plug and play, and I think that's where the editor can come in and say to you, okay, like, thanks for writing this, but I noticed that you didn't respond to some of these criticisms. I noticed that you didn't respond to some of these. How do you feel about them? Are they things that you want to account for in your revision? They seem important to me, but are they important to you as the author? So I think that the role that the editor can play in this process is just kind of being another voice and somebody who's an expert on publishing, not necessarily on scholarship, and can say to you, from my previous experience as a publisher, I think that by not responding to this criticism, you're setting yourself up for this problem further down the line, something that might come up in the published reviews after your book is published. So that's sort of how I approach it. And with the digital publishing projects I've worked on, it's really not that different from with the print projects. It's the same kinds of concerns that people have. Allison, you've probably experienced this. Sometimes the more polished the digital project is, the fewer criticisms you get. If it's less polished when you share it, which is how I do it, you might get more criticisms because there's more room for change. Right?
Yeah, yeah, and we certainly have experienced that. The work that we create is very bespoke, and we have a tendency, or at least to date, we've really sent something quite polished out for review because there are so many pieces to it that it has to hold together, has been our approach. And I forgot which project it was, maybe the one with MIT Press, but we got the readers' reports, and I forgot how it went. I'm sorry, but it was imbalanced. We ended up doing it a second time, not because the first reports were not productive, but they focused, that was it. They focused on the innovation of it. They focused on the navigation, and that was wonderful. You need that feedback, but they really did not comment on the scholarship. And that is the number one criteria for what we're producing. So together with the acquisitions editor at the press, we reached back out to those reviewers and said, would you please this time focus on the scholarly argument? So we have found that that tweaking of the questions, it really makes a difference, because this is a new and different thing for everybody. As new as it is for the authors going through it, it's even newer, chances are, for the reviewers. And so educating them as much as possible on what would be helpful is only going to improve the project and really help the authors.
Thank you, Allison and Sarah, because that's the exact issue that we deal with our Afro-PWW iOpen projects. What I've done is I put a link in the chat for the iOpen reviewer feedback form that we send out, which also includes a question as it relates to the digital features of the project as well. But what I found is, if we have a reviewer, although we send out to 2 reviewers, we try to have one who's really experienced in digital in some fashion, as well as one who is steeped in the discipline, for sure. But we want responses from both of them, because we think that a reviewer who doesn't have experience would come to the project as a regular reader of the project that we are we are targeting as our audience for it. And so we do want to know, did that person find it easy to get through that platform the way it is? Was it helpful in terms of the way in which did it matter whether it had digital documentation, data, etc., or not? Those kinds of things. So that is what we try to find out from our reviewers. And then when that comes back, then we require the same as most manuscript reviewers comments, that you respond to each one of the comments. You either accept it or don't accept it, and then you have to write an explanation as to why you do not accept this as. And then we, the publishers, decide whether you have satisfactorily addressed what the reviewer's comments have been, before we can move on anyway from that. Every author has the opportunity to revise until it is satisfactory for both the reviewer and us as a publisher or editor, whichever word fits better right now. So that's the way that we handle it. And I hope what I've put in the chat is helpful for you on that. I just wanted to add that we'd also put in the AHA and MLA guidelines there specifically, so that you could use those. Most of the people that we deal with BBIP fit into literature or history or cultural studies, and these guidelines can work for you as arguments to your tenure committee or your department, etc., for accepting your digital publication, which is why we require the peer review, because that's supposed to be accepting a publication at a level that meets the highest standards that a particular discipline is expecting of a publication. So these things sort of go together. That's your argument that you can say that you've got a digital publication that has been peer reviewed. Ours are single blind because it's born digital stuff. It's online only, and so there's no way once a project has been published that we can get rid of the author's identity in it. But we keep the reviewer's identity blind, so that the author, should the reviewer want to communicate with it, but the author is not able to communicate with that reviewer directly if the reviewer does not want to be known. So we make sure that is it. But we do ask our reviewers also if they would like to have communication with the author to discuss things. I know in my books, when I had them published, I'm not talking digital now, I'm just talking that I had the opportunity to communicate back and forth with my reviewers, and that was very helpful. So we try to encourage that the reviewer does that. One last thing on reviewer credit, because you all may be asked also to be reviewers someday for digital publication. And what we do is we begin to add our reviewers to our advisory board as some kind of recognition and compensation for them, because generally reviewers do not get compensated. And so recognition for that service that they have done for this publication is a way, that's a way of acknowledging that they have contributed to the work.
So I think that Candace's question might have been answered, but maybe we want to repeat that. You see the question from Candace? Sort of reviewing content versus reviewing the technical aspects. But I think that was addressed. So, but maybe the three of you could, from the different, do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we did. I think Allison and Marilyn both got at this. That like one of the, I think as I heard it, that both of you said that the thing about peer review for digital projects is that it absolutely has to do both of these things, right? And that's one of the reasons that we have to tweak what we might think of as standard peer review questions, so that we're making sure that both the content, the scholarly argument, and the digital aspects and the usability of the digital aspects are all being accounted for, because that's part of the full package, right? But Candace, if you have follow-up questions, just let us know.
I'm trying to think of a question that has come up. I'm trying to think of how to frame it. I think I think the best way to present it is, are there differences in terms of how a peer reviewer or how you as the writer submitting might perceive your audience differently? And does how important is audience for, I mean, is there one undifferentiated audience that you might be thinking about, or people seeing different audiences? Some people may call it community-based audiences. So it's, and the tenure process seems to be less significant, but the publication is equally as important in terms of presenting and transmitting information and doing it digitally. So I guess I'm trying to ask about, how is there some kind of continuum, as it were, for who audiences are, and how the peer review process may or may not shift depending on the audience? I hope that's the way, I hope that makes sense.
That's a great question. And I think something that's very exciting right now, that, I mean, with our authors, as I mentioned earlier, all of our work to date has been published as open access and exclusively digital. So we have global reach. And it's, the Google Analytics numbers are just incredible. If the work were published as a conventional print book, it would maybe get a print run of 500 copies. And instead we're seeing, close to 20,000 readers around the world. And our authors like that, I mean, it still is, it's scholarly work, it's undergoing peer review, it's being published by a university press, but I see them really embracing this opportunity to reach non-specialist audiences, and they are changing their writing style as a result. It's less jargony. The argument is clear, more clear perhaps, and that's an exciting thing to see. Now, what does that mean for peer review? I might pass the baton to Sara for that piece of it. But in terms of the process and the creation of the work, it is making a big difference for the authors. And I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the parts of the question that I heard is like, does thinking about the audience impact the peer reviewers? So first I want to say something about audience that has been really helpful to me in my work as an editor. I had a colleague who said, if you write a book for everyone, you're writing the book for no one. So I think that that's really helpful. So I think you always have to have some kind of audience in mind. And then, so whether that's like for scholars, whether it's for the general public, it's important to know who you're writing to and make sure that you're writing to them. And I think that the peer reviewers can help you ensure that you are writing to the right audience. In terms of thinking about peer reviewers, I need to get people who are tenured faculty to review my projects. And so sometimes, like one of the things that we talk about sometimes is like, well, what if we bring in an extra reader in addition to them? Like I have a book right now about popular music about prison, and I sent it to a potential peer reviewer, and she said to me, I'd be happy to read this, but I think you need to get an incarcerated person to read this too. And I said, well, that's wonderful. I have no idea how to get an incarcerated person to peer review a manuscript. Like, can you help connect me with people? Because it was a person who was a community activist. And so that started a conversation about how we can bring in different kinds of perspectives as we're doing the peer review. And I think that's really valuable, right? And I think that it's ethically important to do it whenever you can. But so I can bring in people from different kinds of backgrounds, people from outside of the scholarly community, but I also need to make sure that the peer review is being done by at least 2 senior faculty members so that people can get over that hurdle of getting past the tenure and promotion committee in the way that Allison was talking about. We need to make sure that this stuff is vetted really rigorously.
So if you remove some of those principles, that is, it does need a peer review by someone who is, for lack of a better term, closer to the content or has that audience in mind, you might get extremely different reviews. So how would you reconcile those extremely different reviews if you had, very different types of reviewers? And the person who is writing is in fact trying to get that larger, non-scholarly audience because they want the information to reach as many people as possible. So what kind of quagmire does that put you in? Aside from the fact that, yeah, you want to get tenure with this book, but if that is less an interest for people, but they want to publish, they think it's important, it has value, but that side of it may not be as important to some of those writers, but it is important in terms of educating the public with regard to the work that they do and the commitment that they've made as an academic or non-academic. So how do you reconcile what might be just very vastly different?
I mean, that's what they pay me to do, right? Is
so you do reconciling. How do you cut it down the middle? How do you do that?
I mean, you got to talk to the author. You got to look at what the readers say, and you have to figure out what's possible. Because, like I said, you might not be able to write to everybody. I think it's almost impossible to write to everybody. And so when you get those disparate peer reviews, and one of them says, this is if you want popular readers to read this, these are the things you have to do. And one of them says, if you want scholars to read this, these are the things that you have to do.
Yeah.
You're probably going to have to choose. And sometimes I talk to people who say, I want to write 2 versions of this book, and I already know that. I'm going to write one that's for scholars, and I'm going to write another version that's for popular audiences. I want to publish the popular one with a trade press. I want to publish the scholarly one with you. And so I think that there is a 2-book solution sometimes. And if somebody has the capacity to do that, that's a good route. But I think otherwise you kind of have to pick who you want to reach. And I think there are ways to write to scholars that are still accessible. And that's something that I try to work with my authors on, is like Allison was saying, get rid of that jargon. If you have to use it, provide clear definitions so that people understand what you're talking about. Imagine, we'll sometimes say, imagine you're writing to one of your undergraduate students. I'll say to people sometimes, imagine that you're writing to your mother, right? And that's something that I do in my writing sometimes. Like, how do I write this in a way that somebody's mom can understand it? And so, I think that, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just talking in circles. But I think either you write 2 books or you pick someone to write to.
Okay. Have you encountered this? Have you actually encountered this yet?
I have encountered this.
Okay.
And I've had to push people in one direction. Because I've made the mistake of saying in the past of saying to people, oh yeah, you can write a book that's for popular audiences and for scholars, and then it ends up just being a hot mess. And the peer reviewers go, I don't understand who this is for. It's not for me as a scholar. And if I was a popular reader, it's not for me either. So there are probably editors out there who are more skilled than I who can figure out how to write to both, but I have not really figured out how to write to both.
Okay. Oh.
As fairly new publishers, we are trying to set up a standard for which we then can, or our authors can, that's prestigious enough for our authors to get tenure and promotion from. So at this moment, we are not entertaining publications that are not scholarship in the sense of the way in which committees think of scholarship. Yes, you can make it more accessible in terms of language, but some of the other stylistic things that come with that, and Miriam, I think you understand what I'm speaking of here, so far as citations and resources and that kind, sources, not resources, sources, etc. We have to be more of a stickler in that area. I sort of see our publications being the difference between, and this might be making it way too simplistic, between magazine articles and maybe even newspaper articles and the articles or book manuscripts that we are publishing. That's the way in which we look at it right now. I think that maybe 5 or 10 more years down the line, when people have a respect for iOpen as a publishing entity, we have a reputation like some of the other publishers that have been mentioned here today, then we can start to bridge out more. But right now, our focus is on satisfying what's considered as scholarly publications.
I'll introduce another scenario of maybe a little bit more nuanced of ways to bring community members into the review of a scholarly work. I was having a conversation just this week with an editor from the University of Guam Press and one from University of British Columbia Press. They're both focused on developing digital publications and within the field of Indigenous studies. And the audience is clearly defined as a scholarly one, but it's really, they see it as imperative that there be a member of the community who can provide feedback on the you know, what might be culturally sensitive material, and just have that Indigenous voice as part of the review and feedback process. But of course, conveying to those community members that this is for a scholarly audience, but we still value your thoughts on the fact that we're about, you know, to share out all of this material, particularly when the author is not a member of the community that they're writing about. So just taking that extra step to make sure that, again, that culturally sensitive material is being shared out in the best possible way. I think that the having the incarcerated reviewer come into that project that you mentioned, Sarah, may be in that sort of category, which I think is very interesting and you know, speaks to the ethics of publishing as well. I think it's definitely.
And I think like along the ethical line, it's important that we offer honoraria for people, right? That we don't just say like, hey, do this extra labor for us to vet our book.
Right.
But, you know, we're going to send you some free books instead. Like we need to offer people some kind of, I don't think we're allowed to call honoraria compensation, but something for the labor.
This is Jada again. That's so interesting because this is what I do at work, but on a different level because I work in EdPub and we do have people doing reviews of educational content. And I'm actually, I mean, I have peers, but they're not a lot of people, not of Black women, for instance, in EdPub doing this work. And I'm always the one saying, we have to have someone connected to this content who actually has firsthand knowledge. Like they asked me to review something about some reading passages about Indigenous persons. And I said, as much as I think I know, I cannot read these passages and really say that these reading passages are okay or sensitive or doing what they need to do. We have to get someone else to review them because I'm just not the one. And they're like, oh, okay, fine. If you want to bring someone else in. And that's important because, again, I know a lot and I've read a lot and I've studied a lot, but there are some things I don't feel like I can speak to. And it's not fair for me to say, well, I think I know enough and I can say this isn't insensitive. And we brought someone in, and it's funny, she said to me, she was really happy because the reading passage, one of them had to do with Chief Joseph. And she's like, that's my great uncle. And it was just amazing, you know?
So an undercurrent of this appears to be there is not a sufficiently diverse or expansive peer review community. That seems to be an undercurrent here. And so perhaps we need to let Mellon know we need to figure out how to encourage that part of it too, so that we get the balance of people willing
That's right.
to be participants in what is in fact a collaborative process.
Yes.
And the authors who are, you know, trying to make their materials as widely accessible as possible. So we've got an imbalance and we need to figure out how to maybe address it. So that's kind of what I'm hearing too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that we've seen in scholarly publishing since 2020, since March 2020, is that there's a real reluctance to take on extra work. People don't want to read manuscripts.
Yeah.
We're finding that because at the peak pandemic, because of the toll that it was taking on minority communities, especially, we had trouble getting people of color to read manuscripts for us. People of color are also, as you know, tasked with all kinds of extra admin duties. And so people say, I would love to read this for you, but I have so much admin duties, like responsibilities, I can't really help you. And then we end up with getting the same old people to review manuscripts for us. I know you're also talking about expanding the community outside of academia, and I think that's so important, and we need to find ways to do that. But I wanted to speak about that as well.
I have a question if somebody else didn't have a question. I'm, like everyone else on this call, extremely new to the process. Have had an amazing time working with Afro-PWW and iOpen, and this whole BBIP program has been so eye-opening for me. My question is quite simple though. What is one thing that you would like to share for those who are engaged? Like one mistake maybe that you made, or that you saw like an author make, that you know, in hindsight would have said, you know, hey, maybe don't make that mistake. What's that, like one thing that you just wish that somebody had told an author not to do? Thank you so much.
I'll try. I don't always practice what I preach because it's so tempting to expand the scope of a project, but that can also, I always ask, almost every day, we ask over here, is it a nice to have or a need to have? And in the interest of completing the project, those really tough decisions, you need to make them and stick with them. And, you know, scope is going to be in flux because you're going to make discoveries, and this is very innovative work. So allowing some space for that, but also always going back to, you know, what do I need? And you know, it can affect not just your time, but the cost. And projects can just really mushroom out of control very quickly if you're not careful there. So I know that's hard, but I think it's really it's necessary to bring the work to a close and get it out there in the world, which is what we all want.
And Allison said exactly what I would have said. I mean, one of the things that I always say to my authors, especially first-time authors, is, does your reader need to know this? Or do you want your reader to know that you know this, right? And I think that that is a question to ask yourself as you're making cuts to text. But I think the same thing happened with digital publishing. We get that, and sometimes it's like a blob and it keeps exploding because it's like, I have all these amazing digital materials and I want to include all of them in my project. And it's like, okay, but does your reader need to see these materials? Do they need them in order to understand the project? Or, you know, like Allison says, is it a nice to have or a need to have? And I think that's so important to always be asking yourself as a scholar.
I think it was mentioned in one of the presentations, either by Allison or Sarah, but flexibility, it's really important.
Yeah.
So I find myself saying that a lot.
Yeah. And you know, scholars do a lot of work, and you can understand they want to include all of that work, but I think it's also about editing yourself, you know, being your own curator, your own editor, or having a support system. You know, maybe you're in a reading group, you know, writing group, or in one of these training programs like this, and just really supporting each other in staying focused and really staying true to the scope that really is necessary for the project.
I don't know if I can chime in really quick, but I did want to get a little bit of a clarification on the question that I asked earlier. So it was mostly for us at BBIP if we were able to submit a digital review request, like right now, to review our scholarship and the arguments that we're proposing in our project, or if it's only for once we get into the production site, if we'll be able to have this
So for us, as you can imagine now, by hearing comments as it relates to obtaining reviewers, it's really hard to get. And we would not like to waste a reviewer in the beginning part of it and not have someone at the end once the project has been completed to do the review. So they're just not that we spend months trying to get reviewers. And I know some of you don't realize how that when we say it's out to review, but in reality, it's months to get one, and it may be months before the reviewer actually gets back, even though we give a 6-week time period. That's what we ask for it to be back in 6 weeks, but we rarely get that. So asking to how now I have a suggestion. If there is someone in your faculty or a part of your professional organization, etc., that you know, perhaps you can ask them to take a look at your work, and then you could move from there, and you could tell us, you could share with us what their comments have been. If it's something that relates to the platforms that we're using, or something that you were trying to do that didn't work, so far as they were concerned, we can share that with our tech support people, who can then look at a means to help you create that project to better suit what that reviewer was expecting in terms of its impact could be. So we could do something like that, but
no, thank you so much, and I completely understand.
Okay, good.
No, I said I completely understand, and so I hope that after I finish my project that I can apply to volunteer for it to help. Yes. All right, I'm gonna turn myself off there.
Okay.
So I do want to be mindful of time.
Can I say one last thing, Erin? I'm sorry, I forgot. I have responses by members of the tech team to the questions that some of you have presented. What I'm going to do is just copy your questions into an email and send you the responses that the tech team provided, if that's okay with everybody. Great.
That sounds great. So I want to take a moment to thank Allison and Sarah for taking the time today to present and to provide really useful and applicable information for all of us and for all of the scholars at various stages of their digital publications. Any final thoughts from you, Sarah and Allison, before we close up?
Just thank you. I mean, we both dropped it in the chat, but really great to be here today. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, same. It's just great to meet you all, to connect or reconnect, and hope that we can do this again. This is a great community, and I look forward to continuing this conversation and problem solving together.
Great. Thank you all so much. Thank you, scholars, for being here. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. Enjoy your Friday and have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you.